Train. The Roman heat beat down from above, peeling away at his pale shirt. He pushed his rolled-up shirt sleeves a little higher up his forearms, desperate to have as little clothing as possible in the August sun. He untucked his legs under the table and recrossed them the other way, before bending down to fidget with the sock falling down inside his shoe. He was then picking nervously at his thumbnail as the waiter passed by, quickly scooping up the empty espresso cup and saucer sitting in front of him, leaving the table suddenly bare. "Excuse me." He raised his hand limply, wishing his voice wouldn't sound quite so immature next to his Italian counterparts. "Si, signor." The waiter had a look of bemusement on his face as he turned on his heel, spinning the tray around somewhat haphazardly. "Could I have a glass of water, please?" He smiled nervously, hoping his English accent didn't come through as harshly as he heard it in his head. "Acqua? Certo." The waiter briskly turned again on his heel, evidently unamused. He sat back, again pushing at his sleeves, as though he could make his shirt into a t-shirt if he pushed them hard enough. Glancing around at the piazza, there were a variety of figures who had chosen to wait out the August heat in the city rather than escape like everyone else. A woman with curly hair piled high on her head tugging at a tanned toddler who was bemused at the water fountain, splashing his hands in the cold flow. Over on a bench under a tree, an elderly couple were fanning themselves whilst simultaneously having a heated argument. A small group of tourists rapidly passed by the cafe, cameras and maps disguising their slightly pink and very sweaty faces. It felt as though this stone city was boiling from every orifice, or at least he was. The pavement and the walls themselves seemed to radiate heat enough to burn bare skin. He searched the piazza for the one face he needed, but still, none appeared. It had already been an hour and 48 minutes precisely. What if it had all gone wrong? What if the plan didn't work? They had prepared for every eventuality, but what if they had been mistaken? What if the typical Italian timings were delaying everything? He tapped at the table impatiently as a glass of water was flung, somehow in a frustrated manner, at his table. Evidently, the waiter was not his fan, though this was the least of his concerns after the day he had had. If they didn't make the 15:24 train as planned, they would be stuck. Wait at the cafe, watch for anything out of the ordinary. Those were his tasks. If he missed the train, he would have nowhere to stay or even any luggage. But none of this seemed to matter, compared to just seeing that face again, just knowing that he was not alone at this moment. If he had just stayed in Canterbury, it would have all stayed normal, safe, and predictable. He would have lived a happy, if dull, life, blissfully unaware of everything this world had to offer hidden under the shield of normal life. Why did he choose to take that fight? And was he going to be asking himself that question for the rest of his life? Since his childhood, his parents had always told him to have a backup plan. His past life flashed before his eyes. Unassuming, average, typical, completely boring. Now, it was full of color, risk, and excitement. That was the choice he had chosen to make, to leave that life behind in its comfortable two-bedroom apartment and risk it all for a suitcase. He chose this, and the lump in his throat told him that he knew that. He felt a bead of sweat sneak its way down from his temple along his cheek, stinging slightly at the freshly shaven jawline. No second thoughts. This was it. This was what he had wanted. He turned as he heard the church bell chime 3 times, echoing around the piazza, as the familiar face he had searched for finally appeared, running into view. The Tamaret Tavern. "Okay, whatever, but I tell you, this place is haunted." Eve slammed her beer down as foamy liquid leaked over the rim onto the table. She sat back, crossing her arms out of frustration at her ignorant colleagues. Aaron quickly jumped up to grab a rag from the bar top before wiping the table down in a fashion that suggested he was quite used to mopping up various drunken antics. "Please, let's not have to clean this place again at this time of night." The wipe got stuck to the plastic-covered menus, which they all knew well enough would never be clean again. don't know, Eve. If we all believed half the customers that came into this place, we'd never come to work again. They're all off their heads half the time, and not to mention 3 times our age. Just ignore them, Eve. Rebecca shrugged as she grabbed her scarf, wrapping the wool repeatedly around her neck before leaning over the bar to grab her bag from behind. Anyway, I'm not staying here any longer to listen to ghost stories. I refuse to open tomorrow hungover. She turned to walk towards the exit, pulling a cigarette and lighter from her coat pocket as she pushed the heavy weight of the door out into the February wind. The 3 remaining staff shivered as the cold air whispered around the interior of the bar. They all teetered between yearning for their warm beds at home and not wanting to challenge the weather outside on their journey to get there. The Tamarack Tavern was one of the oldest buildings on the high street, and it often seemed as though one strong wind could foreseeably bring the whole place down. The tables were all propped up by piles of coasters, but some still teetered. They were surrounded on 4 sides by chairs of various shapes and sizes that weren't quite able to take the weight of the customers, yet still survived. The original wooden bar wound around the far wall, protecting the various shiny taps behind it. It was carved all over with letters and shapes typically by bored customers nursing their 4th or 5th drinks. The owner had long ago given up on telling the staff to stop the amateur artists, knowing that losing a customer was not something they could afford. 2 years ago, he had left to live in Spain, so the Tamarack became his last concern. The bar was once a hot spot, but had seen decades of customers, arguments, fights, and drunken antics. This was evidenced for newcomers by an expansive wall of framed photos to the right of the entrance, filled with questionable and perhaps once famous faces from bygone eras. Many were empty now, or hanging on by a single nail, surrounded by peeling advertisements and posters. The council had decided long ago that the bar was better off gone, replaced with a new shopping center or flats. However, the local community of drunkards weren't having it, at least whilst they were still alive and able to arrive for their daily 5 o'clock pint. I tell you, if I have to deal with that Pete again, I will leave, Nina exclaimed suddenly. It's awful having to work, feeling his eyes follow me around everywhere I go makes my skin crawl. They all knew that Nina would never leave. Though her nights were spent at the Tamarack, she spent her days struggling to drag herself from audition to audition as an aspiring singer with little luck thus far in her 33 years. Most of the staff found themselves working at the Tamarack for one reason or another, but few left quickly or happily. I just can't stop thinking about this weird guy, though. I mean, why did he have to freak me out when I was opening alone? Eve shrugged, taking a sip from her beer. Oh, come on, Eve. We all have to work here as well. We don't want to know why we should be looking over our shoulders, said Nina. Yeah, but we've all heard so many stories of the people that come in and out, the celebrities that once sat next to whoever or whatever. But I've never heard this one, and it freaked me out. What if it's true? Eve shrugged, glancing around into the dark spaces that they had all avoided cleaning for a long time. Fine. All right, tell us, but make it quick. I don't want to be home after 3. Aaron yawned and leaned his head back, ready to listen to Eve's somewhat regular hysterics. Eve spent most of her days at the local college training to become an esthetician, and her reputation as a gossip had far preceded her 19 years. Well, it was this guy that came in pretty soon after we'd opened before the afternoon rush. He sat over in the corner for ages, so I presumed he was one of those fancy tourists who doesn't want to come and order at the bar, but I had time, so I go over. Eve leaned forward, resting her forearms on the table. And he wasn't expecting me, because he was just sat staring at that wall with all the photos, so when I spoke to him, he jumped out of his skin. Then I felt bad, so I asked him what he wanted, and he just stared at me for a good while. I am riveted, Eve, said Nina. But come on, get on with it. Well, it was weird, no? Who just sits and stares at someone like that? I'm not some wax figure. Anyway, in the end, he asked me how long I was working here, and I told him about 2 years. And it's like he shivered. I swear he physically shivered, guys, then said just a pint of lager. Eve continued. Then, of course, it started to get a bit busy, and I didn't have time to go over, but every time I looked, he was in the exact same position, staring at the wall and holding his beard so tight as though it would run off. To be honest, if I had a pound for every man sitting and staring in this place, I would be a rich woman, Eve. Nina stretched her arms over her head, attempting to relax a little into the uncomfortable chair. Yeah, but that's not the weird part. So he suddenly appears at the bar right as I'm down cleaning the fridges, and he says that he used to work here. Just sticks his head over the bar looking down at me. Scared the life out of me, that did. So I said, "Oh, nice, when? Just trying to make things normal, you know." Eve glanced over at the wall of pictures cautiously. He said 40 years ago, he used to live down the other end of the high street on Clover Avenue, you know, by the cinema. Anyway, he said he worked here for a few months whilst his wife was pregnant to make a little more money as she was sick and couldn't work. She swallowed a gulp of beer nervously. So I said, "Oh, nice. What was it like then?" And he just ignored me. But he said that when he worked here, there was a rumor that the place was haunted by the wife of the owner because she found out about his affair. Anyway, that was years and years ago, before there was even a third floor with that other flat. Eve glanced up toward the ceiling. I said, "Well, we always get weird stories working here, but it's just part of the charm because he was freaking me out." But then he carries on. And he says that one night there was a storm and his wife had wanted him to close the bar early, but they got stuck before the storm hit and had to stay until it quieted down. He tried to call her, but the power lines were down, and so they all just sat and waited it out. Then one guy he worked with started telling the story of the owner and his wife when randomly a picture fell from the wall. Eve paused for dramatic effect. "Yeah, but look at the wall, Eve. Even now those pictures are barely holding on by a thread, especially in a storm." Aaron rolled his eyes. "He was just messing with you." He reached over to rub her shoulder comfortingly. "But that's not all. This colleague of his said that the owner had had an affair because his wife couldn't have children. So when she found out, she got so mad and hurt, of course." Eve paused. "And she was insulting him and shouting at him when he accidentally pushed her down the stairs at the back," she continued. "And apparently from then on, things always happened to pregnant women in the bar." "Well, you don't often see pregnant women in a bar anyway, surely," Nina said doubtfully, crossing her arms in front of her. "Yeah, Nina, of course. But he said bad things randomly started happening when pregnant women came in. They fell over or dropped drinks on themselves every time, so this rumor picked up and they stopped coming at all. Then this guy said to me that of course he didn't believe it, and so they were all joking around telling ghost stories for some hours. Then at some point he went to pick up the picture that had fallen to put it back on the wall, and when he was looking at it, he saw a woman in the background of the photo, and she was pregnant. So he told one of his colleagues to come and look. Then they realized that in every single picture on the wall, all the photos, the newspaper articles, the posters even, there was this same figure of a pregnant woman in the background." "Huh. But I've looked at that wall probably 1,000,000 times. There are just old rockers and fans. Definitely no pregnant women." Aaron giggled a little, confused. "I don't know, but that night they saw them in every picture," Eve shrugged. "So this guy gets freaked out, of course, and starts saying that he wants to go home to his wife. His colleague said that he would come with him to watch out for each other through the storm. So they leave, and it takes them ages to get there because the roads were flooded between, so they had to go through Brockman Park. Pretty dodgy. Anyway, when they get home, he runs around the house, but his wife isn't there. They check every room, but she's gone. Of course he freaks out, but they have no chance of finding her until the next day, or at least when the storm ends." "And then?" Aaron leaned in, interested. "The next morning, they contact the police. They try to contact everyone they know who might know where she is, but No one has any idea where she is, so they head back to the bar because the high street had heat first before the estates. And when they got back to the bar, they found her. Found her where? At the bar? Nina asked, confused. She had come to the bar before the storm, but she couldn't get through the front door as they had barricaded it from the inside, so she came round the back, and that's all she remembered. They found her at the bottom of the same stairs, in a whole pool of blood. She was fine in the end, but she lost the baby. Whoa, those stairs between the back door and the big fridge? Aaron asked. Yeah, I guess so, Eve nodded. Anyway, the guy said that they never recovered from the loss. They separated 4 months later and never spoke again. He left the city and never looked back. When he came today, it was the first time he has been back. Today was her funeral. That's why he was staring at the wall, I guess. Nina wrapped her arms around herself as a chill ran down her spine. Yeah, he said he wanted to see again for himself, but every picture is just normal. He said that since that day, he's always blamed himself for not seeing or knowing or guessing somehow. They all sat in silence, uncomfortably glancing around, but all avoiding the sight of the wall of pictures. It's a good story, Aaron chirped nervously. But come on, I'm sure there were more factors other than a ghostly vendetta, though. Maybe she was already unwell and she was walking around in a storm. They both nodded in answer. Yeah, probably, Eve shrugged. I feel like it's time to head home, though, no? They all silently agreed and rose to their feet, picking up their beer glasses and propping them on the bar as they collectively dressed themselves with layers of winter clothes. You know the weird thing, though? Nina spoke suddenly. What's that? Aaron said as he switched the lights off one by one behind the bar. Rebecca told me today. Well, you can't tell her I told you. She put on her gloves, pulling at each finger. She's pregnant. Really? Eve turned quickly to face her. Yeah, she hasn't told Mike because she doesn't feel so keen about it yet. It was a bit of a shock. And of course, she doesn't want to lose the job. Wow, Eve sighed, glancing around nervously. Probably good she doesn't work here that often then, eh? Aaron chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. There was no answer, but they all gathered the rest of their belongings more quickly. As they turned to walk towards the door, a little breeze broke through the bottom of one of the old window panes, whistling around their faces. Silently, a frame slipped from the wall of pictures and fell, gracefully, to the floor. Yet. The clock ticked aggressively behind her, reminding her of how quickly time was just slipping through her hands. The air was cold and clean, matching the white walls that were dotted randomly with colorful posters of smiling faces staring down at her as she sat in the chair, waiting. Ironic how these people could look happy whilst telling you about the symptoms of chlamydia or outlining the support groups for breast cancer. Her gaze fell to a pretty plant sat on the shelf behind the desk, its various vines twisting and turning around the books below, reaching towards the morning sun streaming just out of its reach. It looked somewhat desperate to her, stretching to grasp at this thing that was just out of its reach, just like her. Footsteps and whispered voices walked by again outside the room, and her body tensed involuntarily even after they had passed by. This office still felt foreign, though probably she had spent more time here than anywhere else in the last year. Yet, here she was again wasting time, the one thing she didn't have enough of. They had found the first tumor when she was 18, during her first year of university. She was in the middle of those early weeks of drinking, enjoying life, meeting new faces, and learning about herself for the first time as a proper adult when the pain had slowly appeared. Regardless, she had continued on through the introductory lectures, course events, and clubbing nights. She had danced until the early hours on those cold Thursdays, doggedly refusing to notice that there could be anything wrong with an 18-year-old with her life ahead of her. The headaches had come next, as she sat hungover in lectures, staring at the letters dancing around on the whiteboard. It had been her roommate Charlotte who had told her to go and check it out finally when she was struggling to get out of bed for dizziness, even on mornings that she hadn't drunk the night before. That was when it all began. Her phone vibrated in her lap and she looked down to see the screen. "Mum, I can grab something for lunch on the way to pick you up. What do you want?" She turned it over, angry at the suggestion of lunch choices when she was waiting for news like this. Of course, everyone had the best intentions, but her patience was thinner than ever. Her parents had tried their best, but how could they know what to say when their firstborn suddenly had an expiration date? Her humor had evidently also taken a downfall in the last 6 months. But if you can't laugh at yourself, then whatever next? Last Sunday morning, the newspaper had been left open conveniently to a page with an article from a woman in her 30s writing a letter to her younger self pre-diagnosis. How nice to have had the 20s, let alone 30s at all. She knew it was selfish and short-sighted to be so cruel, but who writes the rulebook for girls who lose their lives before they had the chance to live them? Who will be reading her letter over their cereal on a Sunday morning? The clock appeared again in her consciousness as it continued to tick by obnoxiously. She tapped her foot impatiently. She knew that she had no other plans for the day, but this was 2 hours wasted of a Tuesday morning in April that she might not live again. Who was to say that her time was not too expensive to waste? There was so much to do. There were books to read, films to watch, people to meet. So many experiences were being eaten away right before her eyes. The current suggestion was a new form of medication that would keep the tumor frozen in place, a controllable anomaly just lying in wait. Even so, she wouldn't be able to have children on the drug. A prospect she hadn't even considered was suddenly being pulled out from underneath her, before she had even had a relationship worthy of procreation. Perhaps in 10 years or so they would make a new version, a new treatment. There would be a breakthrough built on the backs of all of those who had gone before, like her. What a line to walk between medicine and unknowns. What ridiculous decisions to try and make, especially for someone who barely knew how to feed herself 3 meals a day yet. Yet. All the things she might never do piled up in the seconds of the day. Kissing a stranger at a festival. Arriving at a hostel alone for the first time after traveling all day on sweaty trains. Giving a presentation to a room full of strangers about a project she had spent months perfecting. Graduating from university surrounded by family and friends, decorating her first apartment, finding new friends in unexpected places. Without giving her the time to grasp at it, life was passing her by, whilst she sat there in the doctor's offices, watching clocks. There were therapies, treatments, trials, all sorts of hope packaged into attractive words. Glimmers of possibility that were tied up in weeks of sickness. What kind of a life was composed of throwing up every meal, being too tired to get out of bed, feeling every bone ache? Yet, here she was, hoping that there would be another option that would give her a chance at life again. Not only for her, but for her family. Her parents were filled with optimistic humor and informative pamphlets. Her brother was just starting exam season. He played football most evenings, hoping to compete for the country whilst holding his sister in the mornings when she threw up her breakfast because of the latest drugs. What kind of a life was this for them? Suddenly, the door handle jolted, and she jumped, fear filling her mind for the millionth time this year. There was a terrifying pause as the door creaked open. "Olivia Mathers?" "Yes." "Home." When they pass me by, they wince, and their faces contort in disgust. Their eyes avert to the other side of the path, suddenly distracted by a flower. I don't care. This is my home. I will always be needed here. This is a place they come to escape. They come here to lie on the grass in the sunshine, to tire out their crazy children in the play area, to walk and wander in the rain, to pass between work and the train, to have a coffee on a bench with a friend. But this is my home. They don't see the care I give to this place, when I clear the path with my bare hands, when I give my last crumbs to the squirrels, when I pick up all their rubbish from a drunken picnic. They just walk on by, avoiding looking at me. They presume to know more about me than they could ever. They know I was a drug addict. They know I was an alcoholic. They know I didn't put my money into savings. They know I wasn't sensible, and I risked losing it all. It's a pretty picture they paint of my life in their minds. I'm their example, sitting here on a bench. The sight of me reminds them to tell their children to be sensible. No one wants to end up like me, and yet, I'm the luckiest of them all. I wake up with the sun. I shower in the rain. I talk to the birds, and they don't judge my decisions. I wander around this place free as can be. I can sleep in the play area when it's cold, sheltered under the slide. I can read the free paper in the morning sunshine that hits the big oak trees. I know every phase of the life of the flowers. I watch as the sleepy bees wake up from winter. I see the birds flirting in the spring. They don't know the freedoms I enjoy here, the life I am so lucky to live. They just look at me and feel shame because of their own fears. This is my home. Fraud. Just please, let's put this aside for tonight and act normally. Her tight bun was loosening, a stray hair daring to breach forward towards her temple. I looked at her as she shivered in the cold, her dress too thin for this March evening, and I wondered how I would ever tell her the truth. Fine, but we're not staying past 10:30. I turned to the royal blue front door, angered by the sight of the silver knocker placed right at the center, and knocked, bracing myself for impact. For God's sake, they're all here to celebrate you. Would it kill you to be great, Sylvia? The door opened with a flourish and we were whisked inside. How are you, darlings? Don't you both look smashing? Sylvia was the kind of lady who had more money than sense, and yet sense enough to host lavish dinner parties at a moment's notice. She was wearing a rich purple dress that highlighted her white curled hair, a fluffy boa spread along her shoulders casually. She didn't wait for an answer before whisking us down the hall, our coats flung off into the arms of the waiting help hidden behind the door. I already felt as though my tie was probably cutting off my circulation. We entered a long sitting room that dripped in glamour. Walls of beautiful books were lit aglow by a million candles. Tables with white tablecloths were spread with various platters of bite-sized food and surrounded by well-dressed guests in black tie. Faces turned to us with excitement and awe. I wondered if this was what my nightmares would look like from now on. The man of the hour, everyone! Sylvia pulled me inside to show me off like a prized pig, handing me a glass of something bubbly. I smiled, hoping that the fear in my eyes was as obvious as it felt in my head. I looked around for my companion, but she was already deep in conversation with a gaggle of ladies. They looked over at me with pride and a slight twang of jealousy. This is Nigel Farrington. He owns the publishing house. Nigel, be nice. Sylvia finally released her grip on my arm as she led me to meet a large, round, and slightly pink man beaming at my arrival. I turned again to seek her guidance, but she was already gone. It's a pleasure to meet you. I stuck my free hand out towards him as he instead leaned in to hug me. Oh, none of that formality. I should be hugging the man that will make us all very rich. Nigel's voice was as obnoxiously loud as one would expect from the owner of the biggest publishing house in London, currently considering opening offices in Sydney, Paris, and Amsterdam. He hugged me tightly, squeezing the last air from my stomach. I don't want to jinx anything. I pulled myself away. Was my voice already breaking from the lump that was rising up in my throat? Nonsense. I've been in this business for decades, young man. I know a hit when I see one. Though I've yet to finish it, of course. This is my wife, Mia. She's probably your #1 fan, but not for long. I turned to see the woman in question, a young blonde, at least a decade younger than Nigel. Her eyes were wide with excitement. It's a pleasure to meet you. I have to say I loved the book. She turned to Nigel. You can ask Nigel. I was up all night last week finishing the final chapters. Yes, I have a bone to pick with you about the sheer lack of comfort I had standing in a boardroom all day after a night's sleep on the old mattress in our spare bedroom. Nigel winked at me. Oh, shush, Nigel. But I have to ask while I have you. I braced myself for impact. How did you come up with the character Lansbury? There are so many layers there. He seems so much more complex compared to his brother. Wing it, just wing it. Well, an artist never reveals his secrets. I winced internally at how idiotic that sounded coming out of my mouth. Where was my wife? Yes, of course, it's just that I've not read male characters in a romance that are written so well by a man in such a long time. I was telling Nigel this morning that it's a revolution. Especially with the time we are all in now. We need more male writers who dare to push the boundaries of gender. She was so naively enthusiastic, I couldn't bear to look her in the eye. Yes. The silence was deafening. I glanced nervously around and wondered how many of these conversations I would have to suffer through tonight. Well, anyway, we won't waste your time. The man has plenty of people to schmooze tonight, Mia. Nigel looked around. By the way, that man with the gray striped suit by the fireplace, he's the producer of Channel 3 Morning News. If you could schmooze your way to an interview, that would be great publicity for the book. He winked and steered Mia away to the drinks table. I glanced around, moving directly away from the fireplace. I was scared to suddenly be alone in this room of wealthy, opinionated strangers. Finally, I saw my wife over by the entrance talking with Sylvia, her backless dress revealing a beautiful silhouette in the soft light. Her bun had lost a few more strands of hair that traced her shoulders. I paused, frozen by the sight. What would I ever do when she found out? When this gorgeous woman that I had spent 4 years knowing more intimately than anyone else finally read this book. I knew that the day was coming closer. There was only so long I could blame publishing delays or promise her a special signed copy hot off the press. Nonetheless, I couldn't bear the thought of her betrayal. How long could I keep facing questions about a book I didn't write? 2 hours at this party stretched before me. I looked quickly about the room for an exit, somewhere quieter away from these inquisitive faces and eyes. Luke! And I was too late. I turned to the source of the voice plastering my face with a fake smile. It's a pleasure to finally meet the man who's the talk of the town. I took a deep breath and turned. Friday night dinner. He really likes chicken, so as today is Friday, I will make roast chicken tonight. I carefully take the herbs from the cupboard, rosemary, thyme, and bay. I ensure that the vegetables are chopped to match each other in size precisely. Carrot, onion, sprouts, and tiny broccoli florets. I break the garlic into cloves, rubbing butter into the plump pink skin of the chicken with my hands. The vegetables sit happily around the sides, glistening in oil. I crack black pepper and salt over the chicken, watching the flakes fall over the curved shape. I squeeze lemon juice carefully over it all before placing the lemon inside the chicken. I halve the potatoes and boil them until just soft before throwing them in a pan with oil and fat. The potatoes and vegetables join the chicken in the oven for the final 45 minutes. Right on time. He will take the 16:54 train from London Waterloo. He will sit in the first carriage of the train, tapping away at his phone, too distracted to notice the heat of the rush hour bodies all packed in together. The train takes 28 minutes until he will reach the local village station. He will get off and probably walk to the house because it's a clear spring day. Perhaps he will stop at the corner shop and buy 2 bottles of Peroni, condensation dripping down their necks. People will stop him and chat because he loves to talk. At the end of our street, he will pause to check his breath, taking that gold ring from his pocket to slip onto the fourth finger. He will put his phone away and plaster on a smile for me. He will arrive at 17:45, like always. The grandfather clock in the quiet hallway chimes 5 times. Everything is right on time. I take a sip of wine. The bitter taste lingers in my mouth slightly too long. I lean against the countertop, my hand resting on the cool marble. I gaze around the silent kitchen. We had spent months arguing over this kitchen. It was a hot summer 2 years ago, roaming in and out of various warehouses discussing with designers. The color of the marble, the cupboard handles, the fridge brand, the freezer compartments, even the number of toaster slots. For someone who had barely set foot in this kitchen, he had opinions on every square inch of this room. He has opinions on everything. I walk over to the sink and turn the tap to the left, running my hands under the water, perfectly warm. I dry them with one of the soft hand towels hanging next to the sink. I can't help but run my palm over the cool marble, brushing a crumb into the sink. It is a beautiful kitchen. The house is otherwise silent. The timer in the shape of an overweight chicken ticks incessantly from its perch on top of the oven. A bird sings cautiously in the garden, breaking the otherwise perfect peace. I could switch the television on for half an hour to pass the time. The 5 o'clock news will fill the kitchen with background noise. I can numb myself with the world out there. Or I could catch the end of one of those American afternoon movies on Channel 5. Each one is different and yet exactly the same. Perhaps I could make a dessert, a trifle or cheesecake. Something he likes. Something that will make him stay. I know that he likes chicken. Yesterday I made chicken Alfredo pasta, the day before a chicken korma, the day before that chicken burgers. The local butcher knows me by face now. That strange lady always coming to buy chicken. I know that he likes chicken, so I make chicken. My days are fairly militant at this point. Half an hour of reading after breakfast, walk to the village shops for fresh meats and vegetables. Resist the judgment of the local gossip. Of course, I see their faces when I go through the main streets. I watch the faces flash from distaste to faux concern when they catch my gaze. I can imagine the discussions that occur as I pass by out of earshot. What did she expect marrying him? Shame, such a pretty young woman. Well, if you ask me, she asked for it. Strawberries. We have strawberries somewhere in the fridge. I take them out and wash them carefully under the cold tap. I can make some fresh whipped cream to go on top. I know that he likes the strawberries. We served them at our wedding. It had been an early summer day, almost the end of strawberry season. There was strawberry juice splashed on several expensive dresses and suits, cream smeared on the dance floor. There is a picture of that day on a table in the hallway, a place that no one ever pauses to look at. I'm looking up at him adoringly, the intricate lace of the dress following the curve of my back. He is looking straight at the camera, handsome as usual, in some intense conversation with the photographer. An arm loosely thrown around my shoulders, distracted, as always. I gently pluck the tiny green hats off the strawberries, throwing away those that are showing early signs of age or softness. I whip the cream by hand, my arm aching slightly from the effort. 17:20. I should set the table. There is a chill in the air in the dining room. I open the doors to the garden, the hairs on my arms raising at the temperature change. I take a fresh tablecloth out of the dresser that his mother handed down to us. She had explained to me how to take care of the wood with painstakingly particular attention, as if I were a toddler. I spread the tablecloth wide, lowering it gently to touch the table. I smooth the creases out with my palms. I take 2 candlesticks out of the cupboard and place them exactly in place before choosing his favorite plates. They are a brilliant white with edges dipped in royal blue. The cutlery joins them on either side exactly right, just as he likes it. 17:25. I go up to the ensuite bathroom that adjoins to our master bedroom. The stairs creak in the same places. I dab the perfume that he bought me for Christmas on each wrist before touching it softly to my neck. The scent is too sweet, too much vanilla for me, but he likes it. I choose to put on the slinky red dress with a tie waist that he complimented last year at his sister's birthday. I roll barely sheer tights carefully up my legs. I slide my feet into a pair of shoes, buffing slightly as some dirt on the left heel. I look at myself in the mirror. The same sad face stares back. My eyes are dull and dark. I dot concealer around the shadows, covering the traces of the tears. I dab a little touch of lipstick onto my lips. He doesn't like it when I leave a mark, so I blot it several times to make sure it won't. Downstairs, the roasting chicken is filling the peaceful air with glorious scent. The bird is still chirping outside now with company. Even the birds have company whilst I wander around this empty house. I open the oven and mix the potatoes, turning them over so that they will brown evenly in these last minutes. I take the butter out so that it can come to room temperature. I slice open some bread rolls and pile them together in the basket, placing it off-center on the table. I put down a mat that will hold the hot dish for the chicken. The table is set. I take a bottle of white out of the fridge, the same one I have already been drinking. Maybe tonight he will want beer instead of wine. I put both glasses on the counter in case. Perfect. Everything is exactly how it should be. 17:35. He should be off the train by now. I close the doors to the garden so that the dining room can warm up a little. The fresh air has filled the space with optimism. We could watch a film afterwards. Maybe he will want to talk about work. Maybe he will be tired after the office. It's been a long week for both of us. They don't see how he is at home, these women that talk about us behind my back. They don't know how he looks at me, making me feel as though I'm the only woman in the world. They don't know how well he loves me. All they know is the stories, the rumors they have continued to circulate. They don't see how he rests his hand on my leg when we watch a film, how he pulls out the chair for me to sit down before him, how safe he feels. The overweight chicken timer is still ticking away. 17:40. At any minute now, he will be here, finally. The phone buzzes on the counter against the marble. If I ignore it, it isn't real just yet. For this moment, I can be the perfect wife, waiting for her perfect husband to come home and eat a perfect meal together on a Friday night in their perfect house. I know that he really likes chicken. The lump in my chest rises, filling my throat. I swallow my nerves. The overweight chicken suddenly sparks into action, relief against the unbearable silence. I take 2 oven gloves from the drawer to the right of the oven. I open the oven and let the heat brush my face. I take the chicken out. The skin is perfectly golden and glistening in the light. The smell fills the kitchen, and I forget for a second. A meal this good is just unmissable. As I slide the chicken over the marble, the phone vibrates again. I glance over at the screen and my heart tightens. Like always, time stops. Tried to call, it didn't go through. I'll be late tonight. I'll just stay at the same place, it's easier. Be back tomorrow, probably. The kindness of strangers. My chest is pounding. It feels as though my heart could burst out of its comfortable cavity, and like my legs are turning to concrete. Just push a bit faster, legs. Come on, move faster. I race through the drunken crowds outside the station. I push past some sloppy drunk couples that are too far gone to realize that they are directly in my way, or care. I narrowly miss the curb, stepping straight into a puddle. Instantly, I can feel the liquid seeping into my boot. There's no time to waste. Move! I swing my bag back onto my shoulder and leap onto the pavement. A bike bell dings behind me in frustration. If you had left 5 minutes earlier, you would not be doing this mad rush. You knew it would happen, and here you are. I can feel my breath catching in my throat. Why am I always doing everything wrong? I burst into the station forecourt. Instantly, I look up at the screens that are covered with random letters, names, numbers, searching frantically for anything with the name I want. There it is, Platform 3. I race towards the platform. Pushing through the barrier, I can already hear the iconic beeping, that door closing beeping known only to the guards and the chronically late, like me. My coat catches on the gate. I spin around, grabbing it and running towards the closing doors. I hit the side of the carriage, hard. It is too late. Exhaustion, shame, and anger hit me hard. I needed that train. Fuck! The guard shakes his head at me, waving me away. He is a minifigure halfway down the train. He looks up and down for any other idiots attempting to get the last train home. The one train that they need tonight, more than anything. The warm carriage that would deliver them to their beds right on time. His opportunity to disappoint others passes. He enters the train. The brakes hiss and the carriage shifts into movement. Faces behind the windows look at me on the outside. I sense a judgment in their eyes. They would have never risked it, I'm sure. They wouldn't have had that last drink. They have never run for a train in their perfectly efficient lives. Stop it. They couldn't care less. I drag myself over to a bench and sit down. Okay, just breathe. Nothing is the end of the world. I pull my phone out of my bag, 12:17. 27% battery. Great work. The next train would be just before 6 in the morning. No point trying any other option. The buses were all out of action due to strikes for the weekend, and I do not have the money for an alternative. Fine. This is it. Here we are. There is a movement ahead of me, and I look up to see a man lingering on the platform. His back is stooped uncomfortably, a fluffy hat trying to balance on top of his hair. A gray beard peeks out from his mismatched clothes. He's dragging a shopping trolley, one that grandmothers pull to the supermarket. It is difficult for him because one wheel is spinning the wrong way. His clothes are ragged, his shoes barely hanging on to his feet. At least I'm not in his shoes. Wait, how did he get past the barriers? He turns his head in the direction of my bench. No, this is not the time to be begged for spare change. Can't he see that I'm not in the mood? I stand up quickly and march back through the gates. One of the cafes is still open, so I take a hot tea to keep me warm for a while. I can feel my sock itching my foot inside my boots. The slightest insignificant thing is annoying me at this moment. The station is mostly deserted, only a few more trains left tonight. Just the odd businessmen who had some drinks after work, some couples leaning on each other trying not to doze off. The guards are lingering, ready for their beds. Wait a minute. Will the station shut at some point? Fuck, where will I go then? I didn't even think about that. How am I always so stupid? Between these crazy shifts, my brain just stops working. What was it that my boss had said? Scatterbrained. That's what you are, Louisa, scatterbrained. We don't know whether you're coming or going. Well, I knew exactly where I was now. I was here for the night. Or probably out on the street like the homeless man. Probably by the time I make the first train and get home, I will be turning back to return for work tomorrow afternoon. I slump into one of the red plastic chairs outside the open cafe. The cold is already kicking in. I knew that I should have thrown my hat in my bag this morning. Another failing. My mother had always told me to prepare for cold and wet. Well, aren't mothers always annoyingly right? I cup my hands around the tea, trying to sip it without burning my tongue. The hot steam gently strokes my face. How am I always ending up in these situations? Always in the wrong place at the wrong time. Must be this scatterbrain I am now apparently known for. Ma'am, hello. I turn hesitantly to the guard, a pained expression on my face. We will be closing the station in 20 minutes, so you know. His forthright face looked down at me as if I were homeless, some dirty pest making his night difficult. As if somehow his night was going badly. Okay, I'll move soon, sorry. I looked up sweetly, butter wouldn't melt. Well, where was I going to go? Just out wandering in the night. The station was in one of the busiest parts of the city, not the place you wanted to hang out on a Friday night. Well, Friday morning. It would be warmer to walk rather than stand or sit in this cold, spooky station. But then, the thought of a young woman roaming the streets at night wasn't really inviting great scenarios into my head at this moment. I couldn't really see another option, though. I scratched at a sticker on the table, a new supermarket opening in the center. Fresh, green, 24/7. Well, I may as well sit here until the time passes a little. Make the most of these last 20 minutes. I looked around. There was a sparse selection of shops in the station. 2 supermarkets, a florist, 3 cafes, some ATM machines. The waiter for the cafe was closing the front of the shop, folding the remaining chairs around me. The space seems lonely, dark, and dull. People pass through here, they don't stay. Unless they're stupid, like me of course. I can feel the cool evening air streaming in from the automatic door. It is enthusiastically opening and closing every other minute for some pigeons pecking at the ground just inside range of the sensor. If only I had not stayed for that last drink, I could just have been responsible and gone home. The old Louisa would have done that no problem. The old Louisa would have been tucked up in bed with a hot chocolate hours ago. The old Louisa probably wouldn't have left the house in the first place. But my brother had told me I needed more friends, and I don't know how to make them. It's always been hard for me. I'm not the award-winning, efficient person he is. So when these work colleagues said they were heading for a drink, I guessed it was the perfect opportunity to practice my non-existent friend-making skills. And here I am, regretting everything. Somehow, I am always getting everything wrong these days. The man from the platform enters my sight again. He is over by the vending machines, checking the slots for mislaid change. He looks up, as if he can feel my disdainful gaze resting on his back, and smiles. Great. Making friends with the homeless now, are we, Louisa? My brother would be so proud. Oh, now he's coming this way. Fantastic. Evening. Do you need a hand? I look up at him, not entirely sure how he would ever be able to help me at this moment in time. No, thank you. I'm fine. I force myself to resist having an obvious reaction to the scent that has arrived with him. Is it so obvious that I'm not fine at all? Well, would you like a stroopwafel? He has a kind face, his eyes looking out from under the hat at me. I'm sorry? Of all the times and places and people, what put him and I together right now? A stroopwafel. He takes a package out of one of his various pockets. It's a sort of round cookie. I haven't done anything to it, don't stress. No, I know what a stroopwafel is. I just wasn't expecting you to have one. But anyway, I'm okay, thanks. He takes a seat opposite me anyway, resting one leg casually on top of the other, and opens the package. No one expects us to have anything, really. I get it. Oh, so yes, he was intending on making this a conversation. I have too, you're sure? I hadn't had any dinner in my rush to make friends, so maybe it would be wise to at least have something in my stomach other than alcohol. Okay then. Good choice. He wipes his hand before taking out another package and passing it to me. I try not to notice the dirt embedded in his fingernails. So, you missed the last train? Yeah, the next one's around 6. I rest the stroopwafel on the cup to let the steam soften the syrup. Well, it will be either the 5:34, 5:47, or 5:54. Those are the earliest trains. Unless you're heading further south, then that's the 6:04. He sighs a little, leaning back into the seat. I wait for the stroopwafel to soften in the steam. After a moment, I bite into the syrupy sweetness. My stomach is relieved to finally be eating something. We sit for a moment in silent appreciation for the food. Do you spend a lot of time here then? I ask. Yeah, it's probably the warmest place on the east end of the city. And most people can't beg easily here. He nods to the guard lurking in the corner watching us curiously. But I know Jack well, so I have the place to myself normally, except for the odd person missing the train, of course. He grins. It's not my greatest moment. I roll my eyes, taking another bite of the stroopwafel, wishing I had eaten a proper meal today. Life happens. We can't always be perfect. He shrugs, wiping his fingers on his trousers as he continues. But it's not the best place to hang out overnight. Can't you take a taxi or something? I don't have the money for that. I can only just afford the season ticket for the train to work and back at the moment. I didn't anticipate that the stroopwafel would come with a side of personal inquiries. Well, I can give you a hand. He leans over to his collection of stuff, unzipping a pocket on the backpack before rooting around inside. No, it's okay. I'll just take a walk around, you know. I was clutching at straws here. I mean, it's not the end of the world. Worse things have happened. I look at him, hoping that he can't see how obviously I mean ending up like him. He chuckles, knowing exactly what I mean. Well, I can't leave you sitting here all night. Here, I made around 30 today. Some of it is in coins, but it'll be enough. He pours an arrangement of cash and notes on the white plastic table. Oh no, really, I couldn't. I protest. Nonsense, I only need €2 for the shelter. I'll be fine. All I need is a bed and a shower. Besides, I'm used to the streets, no one bothers me. He begins to pile the coins together in amount, counting it out to make sure. There's a driver out front called Matt. He's usually soft if you ask nicely. He stands up, zipping the bag closed again as he collects his stuff to leave. Thank you so much, I say. I didn't notice how many things he must have in his various bags and trolley. A whole life in mobile form. He turns at the last minute. Just don't worry about small mistakes. It'll be okay. Sometimes karma is on your side. Okay, but only if you say so. I will come back and return the money to you somehow. What's your name? I put my hand protectively over the coins, though the station is now completely empty, so I'm not sure why they would be in danger. My name is Nick, but really don't stress. Pay it back to someone else who needs it one day. He nods and turns on his heel, pulling his wobbly wheeled stroller away towards the exit. By this point, I am quite sure that I must be dreaming. If it wasn't for the coins lying under my fingertips, I would pinch myself. Did I really just receive €30 from a random homeless man? Where would this evening lead next? I glance around, hoping something would make sense. I catch the eye line of the guard walking towards me. Of course, him again. I quickly gather the notes and coins into my pockets, struggling to find my feet underneath me. Ma'am, again? The guard is performing well as an alarm clock tonight. Yes, I'm leaving now, I promise. What way are the taxis, please? I ask sweetly, hoping that he won't decide to physically kick me out. He nods in the direction behind me, pointing to the sign stating, taxis. Right, yes, thank you. I smile through gritted teeth. I grab my bag, pulling my coat tightly around me as I head towards the exit. Outside, the evening is still well underway. Several taxis and bikes are swinging past. People walk by, briskly heading home or slowly enjoying the late night air. What was the name of the taxi driver? I head to the first in line, stooping to look in the window. Hello, I'm looking for a Mike. A friend told me you would be here. I ask cautiously, expecting to finally realize this entire exchange has been a dream. A head ducks to meet my eye line. Yep, no doubt Nick sent you. He unlocks the back door. I nod hesitantly. Is there a hidden camera crew about to jump out and record my reaction? Jump in, I'm on my way home anyway. Where are you headed? He ignites the engine as I step inside. As the taxi ticks into action, moving into the night, I take a moment to pinch myself. Nope, I'm still here. I settle back into the warmth of the back seat. We speed past the lights of the city, and I can feel myself breathe. Maybe this day wasn't the end of the world. He only does it for certain people, you know. Matt looks at me in the rearview mirror. Every now and then he sees someone that needs a break, and there he is. I lean forward, keen to know something more about this mysterious man that had chosen to lend me a hand. Oh yeah? How do you know him? He was a taxi driver too once upon a time. He spent over 20 years doing it. He knew this city inside out. Then he lost his son and he was never the same again. He couldn't keep up with life normally and now he doesn't want to be a part of it at all. It was an awful tragedy. Matt tutted, indicating left towards my house. What happened? I asked, curious to know more. Maybe you saw the story in the news. It was big at the time. His son missed the last train, like you. He had a big project at work that he stayed late for. Problem was that he tried to walk back home and then he was hit by a car on the road. Matt sighed before continuing. It was a big news story at the time because the driver was drunk. Anyway, Nick could never forgive himself for not being there to get him home safely. He was never the same again. Wow. That poor man. I instantly felt ashamed for not seeing the human behind the image of a homeless person in my mind when I had first seen this man on the platform. How stupid I was to make presumptions about his life and my own embarrassment. Yeah, his son was all that he had, really. So now he hangs around the center, sleeps in and out of places. He likes to help people out when he thinks they might need a hand. I guess it was your lucky night. Matt smiled warmly in the mirror. I sat back into my seat, the insignificant worries of my day falling from my shoulders. I couldn't have known, but now I did. Everything that I meant to say. 1 minute she was here, and the next she was gone. Just like that. She had vanished. Her purse was still on the kitchen counter, full to the brim with restaurant vouchers and loyalty cards that she would never use. Her keys were strewn on the table where she had hurried to pick up the phone coming in the front door. Her wardrobe emitted the same scent, her scent. There was toothpaste from this morning dropped on the sink. Her pillow was dented into the shape of her face, her lipstick molded to the curve of her lips. Every trace of her was here, except now she wasn't. These hints were the only part left of her existence. When people die from something long-term, they are given the time to accept that it will happen. The time to cry and talk and sing and pray. Their loved ones can say the silly things that they always meant to say. They can hold their hand one more time. They can watch that one film they always meant to. They can eat the food they love to eat. They can listen to their favorite songs. What about those who don't get that time? What about those who meant to say, I love you before they ran out the door, but then they wanted their winter coat instead of summer and got distracted? What about the people who meant to say, oh, you're actually a great cook, but thought they would leave it to tomorrow? Those that wanted to say, thank you for everything you do, but thought that it was probably a bit much for a Thursday afternoon? Those that will bite their tongues forever, knowing that they should have just spoken, wondering if this person knew anyway, hoping that they did. Hide and seek. I don't know how I ended up here. It all began this morning after breakfast, or before breakfast, I'm not sure. When was breakfast? No, wait, I remember, of course. I had my oats plain with a dash of syrup, my favorite, 2 lumps of sugar in my tea. Macy poured it just the way I like it for once. She's so much better than Sue. Sue always makes it too hot. So then this must have happened after breakfast. For some reason now I'm sitting in this car, but I can't open my eyes. Well, I can, but I can't see anything but darkness. Maybe my eyes are covered with something. I'm not sure why that would be. Maybe they're taking me to the doctors. They know I usually get car sick, so they're probably protecting me from looking at everything passing by. A new treatment, perhaps? But then, there's still no need for us to be moving so fast. I can hear other cars honking at us. We are probably breaking some speed rules in this area. I think that today is Thursday, because on Thursday morning we watch that program on TV in the sunroom. We play along with the game show, guessing the words ahead of the contestants. Most of the contestants don't even know the references. They're far too young. We watched that show this morning, I'm sure. There was a question about the Athens Olympics, and I got it right. Sports have always been my thing. Then before lunchtime, the lady came with the brown curly hair. She's so lovely. She looks exactly like my Angela used to look when she was young, and we fell in love. Her cheeks flush the same way when she's nervous. She's always nervous around me. I think her name starts with an R, Ruby, or something colorful like that. I don't know why, but we really are moving quite fast for some reason. Even with my eyes closed, I can feel it. If only I could see, maybe I could help them with the directions if we are late. I've always known this city like the back of my hand. I haven't been blindfolded since we used to play hide and seek with Robin and Rose when they were young. We could play that game for hours outside in the garden. Robin was always the best at hiding. He found spots in the strangest places, under the trampoline or between the floorboards. One time we had given up and we went in for an afternoon snack. Then Robin was so angry at us for not finding him. I did tell him that we had shouted to him, but he didn't hear. He was always competitive. He had hidden in between the rose bushes, and so he had 1,000 different cuts. Angela was mad at me that day. She said it was irresponsible parenting to let one's child play hide and seek in a rose bush. I told her, they're kids, and they're competitive, Angela. And there are worse things in the world than some cuts from a rose bush, especially one planted in honor of his older sister. But now I'm not sure why I'm blindfolded. I've never played hide and seek in a car. I'm fairly sure that Robin and Rose are much too old to play now, though it has been a while since I've seen them. Maybe they are driving. Maybe we're going somewhere nice. I think we went out for a walk in the sunshine when the lady with the curly hair came this morning. Yes, after the game show, we sat in the garden, in my favorite spot around the side of the house next to the oak trees. She told me about her job. She's an occupational therapist. I have no idea what that means, but it sounds important. It's nice of her to take the time to talk to me. I like the company. I like that she looks like Angela. She makes me feel safe. She told me that she was taking her father out this afternoon for a ride. She said she was looking forward to it as she was going to take him to the new sports track out behind the school. I told her that was a lovely idea. She probably doesn't know I was a professional athlete, 7th in the country in my peak. But no need to tell anyone that now I've been retired all these years. Gosh, I would love to spend an afternoon looking at a new track. But now I'm becoming really quite uncomfortable in this position. Every time I try to remove the blindfold, my hands can't move. They're pulled down by my sides. I can hear quiet voices every now and then to my right and behind me, but whenever I say something, there is silence. Why doesn't someone answer my questions? Where am I? Why am I hungry? Where's the lady with the curly hair? I remember that I was in a car waiting for her outside of the petrol station. This lady, Ruby or whatever, had gone inside to buy me a sandwich for lunch. I told her that 1300 is my lunchtime, and I must have a sandwich now, otherwise I will be too hungry for dinner. I told her that I needed a sandwich now, right now. I was confused. I didn't understand who she was or where we were. Normally, I have my sandwich in the sunroom. It is usually egg salad on Monday, Wednesday, and Sunday, then ham and cheese on Tuesday and Thursday. Then on Friday and Saturday, they make something unusual for me in the kitchen. I don't normally like anything unusual, but Kevin the cook makes sure they give me warning ahead of time. I don't understand how I ended up in a petrol station sitting outside in a car when I could just have my ham and cheese sandwich waiting for me at home. Oh, the car has stopped. Maybe we have arrived. What a relief. I can hear shouting outside. I hope no one is having an argument for my sake. I can easily go home, no need for any fuss over me. I can still make the 1500 quiz on Channel 3 if we hurry. I think this lady had been in the petrol station when the man got in. He had got in and then he told me to get out. I told him I was waiting for my sandwich and I had to have lunch on time, so no, I was staying exactly where I was. Silly man. For some reason, this man then had a friend who arrived in the back seat. I don't know how he got into the back seat all of a sudden, but maybe he knew when I would get my lunch finally. I think at some point when we were in my favorite spot outside, the lady with the curly hair had said we could drive to her old school. She said we could see a new track built for the students out back. I was going to tell her that I was an athlete once, when I was in the car. But then these men arrived, and then everything went black. A cat person. I was never a cat person. Ever since I can remember, it has been dogs that win for me. Puppies, dogs, big, small, fluffy, curly, scruffy, dogs. I was the child who had a puppy at the top of her Christmas list in the #1 spot every year. I was the child who wrote letters, or rather impassioned pleas to my parents, detailing every reason why I should be allowed a puppy, why I deserved a puppy. Reason 1, I have bought a lead and a dog bed. Reason 2, I will take care of my puppy and I will walk it. That was probably as far as my 6-year-old brain stretched as to the concrete reasons why I deserved a puppy. Now, as an adult, I know that my parents were correct. I would not have been ready for a puppy, and more importantly, they did not want to take on a furry child. They did not have the time alongside full-time jobs and several children to raise. We, collectively as a family, did not have the space or the patience to responsibly raise a 4-legged friend. In hindsight, a puppy raised in our household would have been allowed to run riot. There would have been very little space or time for necessary training and care other than the bare requirements, if we would have had time for those at all. Yes, in summary, getting a puppy would have been a disaster. It is probably the smartest decision that my parents have ever made. And so, my adoration has been restricted to dog sitting, staring at dogs from afar, dog movies, combing through adoption pages, and wondering when I will be able to get a dog. Some might say that my life has been very dog-central, obsessive even. But let's talk about the other end of the spectrum. The salt to the pepper, the chalk to the cheese. Cats. Dogs are friendly, attentive, loving companions. Cats, on the other hand, are aloof. They don't like me, and I don't like them. Name a happy cat. Can anyone name a happy cat? Even if you can, then ask yourself, are they actually happy or biding their time? Well, then it happened. The beginning of September last year. Monday the 13th to be precise. An ordinary day that ended with me losing my best friend, my other half. The friend I would have to last beyond all friendships. The friend who would be there through the relationships, the breakups, every part of life. Lena had lived 3 doors down. We met in the first class of year 7, and from that moment we did everything together. We knew each other inside and out, back to front. She was my lifetime, and she was gone in an instant. My life became smaller and smaller. I didn't go out if I didn't need to. I was given permission to work from home and then given part-time hours. My parents would visit every other weekend to just check in. My brother would stop by randomly, unannounced, probably to check I was still breathing. And I was, as far as everyone could see, still breathing. As far as they could see. That was when it had happened. One Tuesday evening in the following March, I was midway through my mushroom stir-fry in front of a mindless TV show when the window opened. Silently moving around the frame, a cat just appeared on the windowsill. I had been asking the landlord repeatedly to fix the windows. During the winter, they may as well be made of plastic, and now here they were, letting any old cat push their way in. She sat there for a long time. Something about that stance told me that she was a she. She was too confident to be a man, and I have absolutely no idea how I would discover her gender physically. I believe that she was probably reading me at that moment, analyzing me up and down, delving into the dull depths of my soul. What a sight she saw then. Me in my stained pajamas, the room cluttered with dirty clothes, pizza boxes, and other random items. Items I had kept from Lena in case In case what? In case she reappeared and needed them? This cat probably thought that a bomb had hit this room, and yet she continued sitting there, judging me and my mess. At the time, I was convinced that this was probably it. Either she would survive or I would. There's something about the way that a cat looks at you. It always appears as if they are doing complicated arithmetic in their minds about how to kill you. Especially as I didn't have food for her. At least she definitely wasn't having my dinner. Therefore, I had no purpose for this animal. I exist as a nuisance, a Tuesday evening entertainment option instead of playing with mice or terrorizing small children. So she carried on sitting there for this extended amount of time. My stir-fry had gone cold by the time my mind returned to the thought of continuing eating. I only moved because I had pins and needles, otherwise I would have just stayed there, frozen, waiting for her to move. I have to add that she is a spectacular-looking cat. She has this rich brown coat with carefully placed white spots dotted all around. There's one on her foot that makes it look as though she has a peg leg from some angles when she is slinking around. Her eyes are the real beauty, though. Green and amber flecks with these big dark pupils staring into your soul and probably simultaneously brainwashing you into believing felines are the superior being. She sat there for so long on that March evening, frozen so completely still that I thought maybe I was genuinely dreaming. I began to wonder if this was the ghost of Lena, come to check on me. And then she was gone. As suddenly as she had arrived, she left and there was a gap at the window. That was the first time she visited me. As my life got slower and darker, she would appear randomly at the window or on the tiles below. Sometimes in the mornings, sometimes in the evenings. I had no idea which house she came from when looking down at the mini gardens from my flat window. It could have been anywhere. Maybe she had a lovely family somewhere with several luxurious beds and fancy scented cat litter. A family that didn't miss her coming and going through the cat flat because they were so busy with their exciting lives. I don't know how far cats can roam. She seemed as though she could be an independent woman. My life became so small, days consisting of food shops and calls with my mom. Work was monotonous and dull. Life lost its meaning after Lena. Who did I go to with good news? Who did I go to with bad news? What if there wasn't any news at all? I had lost my companion, my barrier to the real world which was looming large outside my door. If you can lose a life so quickly like Lena, then why live it at all? I began to look forward to the moments when I would catch a glimpse of her climbing along the fences or attempting to paw at the birds flying above. But it took months for her to attempt to come into my room again after that initial assessment in March. Nonetheless, she must have decided that there was more to see in this dark and desperate room of mine. It was a Sunday evening in April, and I had just finished calling my parents to update them on the news that hadn't changed since the day before. They had told me again to try to go out. They thought I could join an exercise class. This was the latest suggestion. I sat and ummed and ahed in all the right places to make it seem as though I just might drag myself into a room of sweaty bodies anytime soon. Then, as I went to close my laptop, I saw the movement at the window and froze. The nights were already getting lighter with summer approaching and the clocks had just gone back. And there she was again. She peeked around the window and, in my childlike excitement, I jumped up. I have no conscious recollection of why this would happen. After all, I'm absolutely a dog person. And yet, there I was, leaping to her arrival like a servant to a queen. At this excessive movement, she quickly dipped out. I wouldn't blame her, to be honest. Far too much nervous energy in this particular room for her liking. And there I was, disappointed, really disappointed. I was disappointed, the not cat person. I felt like, of all the things I could be successful at in this moment, I couldn't even attract this cat. I decided that this was the least I could do at this moment in life. Accordingly, the next day, I cleared up. I threw away the takeaway packaging, the dried flowers from the funeral for Lena. I packed away the clothes I had adopted, washed the ones that needed it. I made my bed for the first time in too long, and I even hoovered. This cat was getting the presidential treatment. If I was going to do anything well, and if I was going to make friends with anyone, it would be this cat, apparently. I wonder if she had other rooms that she would pop into unannounced. People with successful lives and candles, people who fed her and knew how to appeal to a cat. Then I waited, almost another week of evenings spent distracting myself from my loneliness. I left the window ajar despite the chilly spring evenings just in case she happened to be passing by. I decided to give her a name, to make this relationship less one-sided. I chose Margaret because it had been Lena's favorite name. "If I had a daughter, I will name her Margaret," she said one drunken night as we sat and ate cold pizza. "After Margaret Atwood, because someone deserves to be named after her. I want to give my child that legacy." So she became known as Margaret. An admittedly odd name for a cat, so I presumed that I could shorten it to Gary or Maggie if need be. If I were needing to call her, which realistically wasn't going to happen anyway. I waited for Maggie for another month until the moment arrived that she finally found the courage to enter my space. It was as if she knew somehow that I was having the worst week. My boss had called me for a meeting, then told me in a particularly patronizing tone that they couldn't allow for any further personal distractions. I'm not sure how your best friend dying can be counted as a distraction, but here we are. I would have to clock into the office again and check out with him every evening. It was the hardest thing I've ever done trying to go back into the office. Trying to take the train every morning and evening, attempting to make small talk at the office kitchen with people who whispered about me behind my back. One evening I was on the edge of tears when I had come home to find a flower subscription prompting me to order flowers for Lena's birthday, as I had last year. Her birthday was the 25th of May. She would have been 24 this year. Last year I had organized a picnic in the park for her. The sun had shone and people had come and gone into the evening. She had loved every moment. She loved being around people, talking and laughing. She was always good at that. She was my buffer to normal socialization. I didn't know how to do it without her. She had put the bouquet of flowers that I bought her in a vase on her desk and kept them until the petals were falling from the stems. Flowers are beautiful in every stage, not just the blooming. She found the light in every darkness. When I came home from work and found this reminder, I crumpled into a pile on the floor. I'm not sure how it will ever feel normal to not have her around. How I will ever have a year where the 25th of May doesn't feel like the worst day ever. These birthdays and celebrations that we should have shared together, these moments that she should be here to see, she would have enjoyed them so much more than I ever could without her. That was how Maggie found me, a lump in the bed covered by the duvet and bolstered by pillows, surrounded by tissues and various food items I had found in the kitchen. I was so dazed in my world that I didn't notice her come in and sit on the floor, staring up at me. She made me jump when she let out the tiniest meow, as if she was calling attention to her presence. Then she jumped up onto the bed and stood in front of me, staring into my eyes as if she had something incredibly pressing to announce. I was full of sniffles and sobs, but I reached out a hand for her to sniff. Once my scent was approved, she allowed me to stroke her. She even lay down for a moment and rolled over, ruffling the variety of tissues and wrappers. She picked up the flower delivery reminder and played with it, ripping the paper. That was the day she arrived, and she never left. Of course, she did actually leave. Maggie is an independent cat with things to do, but she would make sure that her evening rounds included a visit to me. Sometimes, if I was lucky, she would also visit in the morning, especially on the weekends when I would lie in bed most of the day. One day, I was sitting having coffee with my mother when she asked if I ever wondered why Maggie had appeared at this time. I had chuckled at her insinuation. My mother was prone to overestimations of animal understanding and importance, despite never getting me the puppy I wanted. She had once said that a spider on my exam paper was my grandmother back to watch over me. And I wonder, though I would never tell my mother, of course, I wonder why Maggie arrived at this moment. If my window being closed all these years previously was the only thing stopping her from coming by, or she just didn't sense that I needed her. That summer, she kept me company. I began to make new friends through a painting class, something that my parents had also recommended, but don't tell them I said so. She would come by and play with my paintbrushes, dipping her paws in the paint. I tried to wash her off, but she is an independent woman. So occasionally I would have cat paw prints scattered across the floor or table, once even on the bed. Leaving my window open for her to come and go became a normal thing. I even became tempted by some cat treats in the supermarket, which only pleased her more in her daily visits. By August, she was very comfortable with me, though my friends and family had never spied her in person. I would tell everyone I met about this mysterious cat that had made herself my companion. I was finding it easier to get through the days now, able to cope without breaking down at the sight of Lena's name in my phone or socks in my drawer. The weight that had sat on my chest that awful day was slowly lifting, gradually allowing me to breathe without feeling guilty for doing so. I knew that Lena would want better for me. She would want me to go on normally. When the anniversary came around, I was prepared. I had cried the night before, trying to rid myself of the tears that I knew would probably continue to flow. We planned to spend the afternoon at the cemetery with her family after a pub lunch at Lena's favorite place. I was even taking the bus again now. It had been too crowded and intense for many months, but now I was slowly getting used to the crowds. I was stood waiting at the bus stop, breathing in the late summer air. I wore one of Lena's favorite t-shirts, and I was impressed that I had felt lighter this morning putting it on, less terrified of the world lying outside my front door. The street was full of people on their way to school, work, life. Cars, bikes, scooters, and legs moved all around me, and I was perfectly still, taking it all in. When the bus was delayed for 2 minutes, I glanced at the notice board covered with an assortment of stickers, advertisements, and timetables. Something underneath the mess caught my eye. 2 dark pupils staring out from those green and amber eyes. It was Maggie, a picture of Maggie at the bus stop on a missing poster. Please help us find Gatsby. Missing, 13th of September, 2019. Much loved family cat. Reward available for information. My stomach dropped. Monday the 13th of September. The same day that Lena had passed away. I would almost believe it was too coincidental if it wasn't for the name. Lena's passion for literature-inspired names didn't end with her beloved Margaret Atwood. I knew that since we had first read the infamous book in year 10, she had always planned to name her son Gatsby. I know that it's stupid, but come on, wouldn't he be a cutie? No one would have trouble remembering him if his name was Gatsby. Not like boring Lena. Perhaps people would forget Lena. But I never could, and with Gatsby's help, I never would.